You are listening to the Naturally Thin for Life podcast with me, your host, Laura Dixon. I'm a certified life, weight, and health coach, and I'm going to teach you how to get out of the diet mentality so that you too can be naturally thin for life. I'm going to take the mystery out of it for you so that you can become naturally thin starting today. Are you ready? Let's do this. Hello, friends. This is episode 49, Naturally Thin Exercise. Friends, there is a reason this is a podcast about losing weight and being naturally thin, and it is episode 49 before I talk about exercise. I know that so many of you intellectually understand it isn't about the exercise. Like even when you're counting and tracking and you're trying to create this deficit and you're seeing all of the things, you can see how when you then go to eat multiple rounds of snacks in the evening or at 4 o'clock, how that can unwind any amount of exercise that you do. And you really intellectually can understand it, but you still use exercise against yourself sometimes. And so I want to take you from intellectualizing this concept to really seeing it and like believing it in all of your bones. Because this was one of the most freeing things that I did for myself and that I understood as part of my naturally thin journey because, guys, I was an intense exercise fanatic. And now, not having that pressure of exercise, I get to just enjoy exercise for the sake of exercise, not because it's how I lose weight. And I want the same thing for all of you. And before we get started, just a reminder, if you're enjoying the podcast and loving the podcast, if you can go to wherever you listen to the podcast on any platform, and it's usually at the bottom of where all of the episodes are listed, you can write a review and leave a review, and that helps other people find the podcast. And I know so many of you are getting so much out of it, and I hear from you and about the weight you're losing and all of the things. And my goal, my mission, what I imagine for this world is where all women, yes, maybe a little bit of an extravagant vision, but I imagine a world where all women are free from the obsession with our weight, so that not only can we have that, but we can pass that on to future generations of our children, of other women in our lives, and like what we would all be able to do with all of that freed up mental energy. And so this podcast is a big part of that. And I know so many women haven't found the podcast yet, and they thank you because when you write a review and leave a review and subscribe, it helps the platform suggest it to other women. So thank you in advance. Now, back to exercise. Here's the thing that I think we do, and it can be a softer version of this, but often you use exercise in kind of a self-loathing, a hint of a punishment sort of way, either because you ate too much or because you need to pre-work off food that you're going to overeat later. We use exercise as this way to kind of manipulate our weight loss journey in a way that doesn't serve us. So exercise should never feel anything like a punishment. It should feel more like a release, like something you get to do. If you tell yourself it's something you have to do, that's not quite the right way to go about it. It should be something that you get to do, something you enjoy doing, something you look forward to doing, something that you miss and you long for it when you aren't able to do it for whatever reason. Maybe your child was up all night. Maybe you have a really early meeting at work. You should not feel anxious and fearful when you don't exercise. It might feel subtle, but when you notice if you don't exercise or you can't exercise or something came up last minute or whatever happens for you, it shouldn't feel like an anxious, fearful, panic, pressure feeling. It should feel like oh, I really miss that. I wish I could do that. I love doing that. Because that cues you into how you're using exercise. If you have anxiety and fear around not being able to exercise, and then you worry about getting on the scale because you couldn't work out and like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? And you're going to put weight on, all that, that means you're using exercise as a way to lose weight, as a mechanism to lose weight and keep it off. And it just isn't sustainable because you put all of this pressure on exercise as part of your weight loss journey. When you put pressure on it, it's going to create this really tight gripped relationship that just doesn't serve you long term. And it may come in an even softer voice, like a little voice that tells you, well, I worked out today. When you go to get that second plate of dinner, or when you think about a second or a third round of snacks, or when you eat some treats in the break room, it's like, well, I worked out today, so it doesn't really matter, right? When you have that pressure on exercise and your exercise is a big part of you losing weight, you create this kind of pull-tug relationship with it that it never serves you in losing weight and keeping it off sustainably. Because I know you know this, it is not about the exercise. One donut unwinds exercise really quickly. And then it just creates this cycle of like, I need to exercise, I need to exercise, I need to exercise with all of this pressure and all of this panic and all of the things around it that just doesn't help you then when you go to make your choices around food. And now, I love to exercise, by the way. Like, love it. With a big caps lock, love. So this is not about not enjoying exercise and not exercising and saying, well, I'm never going to move my body, right? It's really important to move our bodies, but to move them in a way that feels authentic, that feels genuine, that we enjoy, and that we love moving because the movement feels good, not because it's how we lose weight. And I genuinely love to exercise because I just love to move my body. Not because it is how I keep my weight off. And it is just a much more freeing, calm place to be. And when you have more freedom and a calmer, more peaceful sense of being, guess what? Your desire to overeat goes way down. Notice when you have that fear and anxiety response around exercise, your brain will often immediately then go to think about food. It's crazy, right? We're like, okay, I couldn't exercise today because I had a really early meeting that I had to go in for work and I had to prep, and I usually exercise in the morning, so I didn't have time. And so you create all of this pressure and panic, and you're like worried about gaining weight. And when you are feeling pressure and panic and fear and anxiety, your mind's auto response is we should eat some food. That'll make us feel better. So it's like, I didn't get to exercise today and I keep my weight off with exercise. And because I've created this really relationship with exercise that doesn't serve me, now I feel so terrible because I wasn't able to exercise, I'm going to eat. Like, what? It's wild, right? But I get it, and I've been there. And so this is not to not exercise, but it's just to change how you think about exercise so that you get to experience it in a much calmer, more genuine way of being. In the way you imagine you would want your daughter or your son to enjoy exercise. When you think about kids playing, actually, I think I've used this example before on a live training. I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast, but here, this was not in my notes, so sidebar. There are some children that live in our subdivision. And this is just what I want you to imagine this for yourself. Okay, so there are some children that live in our subdivision. And think about how you imagine children moving their body and exercising, right? You think about them playing and running around, and maybe they play tag, and maybe they ride their bikes, and they're constantly moving their bodies, and they love moving their bodies. And when they can't move their bodies, you can just see like they just genuinely want to move them. They want to get outside and play just to play and move around. Definitely not because they're trying to lose weight when you think about little kids. Now, there are some children that live in our subdivision that are, if I had to guess, I'm not the best at guessing children's ages, but they're probably between 6 and 10. And I'm sure their parents are really well-meaning, but they take them on runs. There's 3 girls. They go on runs. They're 6 to 10. And there was one day my husband and I were outside, and the father was running with them, and they're running, and the look on their faces is just like, oh, why are we doing this? It looked painful. We looked at each other like, whoa, that does not by any means look healthy. And so as my husband and I look at each other, we hear the dad saying, pump your arms, grind it out, to 6 to 10-year-old girls. And I just face palm. If I could send you an image, I want to put my head in my hands and just be like, no, right? When we think about that for little kids, we're like, oh, those poor girls. Like they probably just want to play and ride their bikes and like do things outside. They don't want to be like forced to be jogging down the street. Yet that imagery that I just provided you is what we do to ourselves. So what I want for you to change is just how you think about exercise. So it's a much more playful, free, calm, peaceful thing that you do that fuels you and it does not drain you. Just like developing your relationship with food is a skill, when you genuinely love exercise, then the exact way you do it can change. When you genuinely love moving your body, you can change the different forms that you move it without this attachment to a really specific way. It's just like when you think about losing weight with a particular diet, then when you get to your quote unquote goal weight, you don't know how to keep it off because all you've done is been really attached to this diet. It's the same with exercise. When you're really attached to a particular way of exercising because it burns the most calories or does the most whatever, creates the biggest deficit for you, then when you get to your goal weight, it means you have to stay doing that form of exercise. And if you don't love it and genuinely love it for the sake of exercise itself, it's going to feel so miserable. And the more miserable it is, the less likely you're going to do it. When you imagine those girls going for a run down our subdivision, they are not sitting at home thinking, I can't wait to go for a run if those faces said anything. They're like, can we play yet? Right? And that's the same thing that happens for you in your brain. It's like, can I just do something that I enjoy yet? So when you take the pressure off of exercise and you genuinely love it because you just love how it feels in your body, it is just a much more peaceful way of being that then also makes eating from a more peaceful place that much easier. And your mind will actually want to do it because you enjoy it. This is also part of losing that layer of what we sometimes call like the inner critic. That voice, it can be a soft voice to an extreme voice that's hard on you and it judges you, and it can use being hard on yourself as a way to try to motivate you to lose weight. And it may work temporarily, but it takes so much willpower and energy and it eventually stops working. And it also means if you use being hard on yourself to motivate yourself with food, with exercise on your naturally thin journey, that will also be how you have to keep the weight off and how you have to keep exercising. I am going to walk you through a little bit of my exercise journey because I know from what I hear from all of you, so many of you can relate. And I want you to just think about how to open your mind up to a more loving relationship with exercise. When I was younger, my sister and I actually have 3 sisters, but the youngest sister and I, we were on a swim team. And I dreaded it. I enjoyed it in the beginning, and I was actually decent at it, but I didn't love it. And sometimes practice was 2 hours. 2 hours. And this wasn't even a super competitive team. And like, imagine being in a pool for 2 hours swimming. And like, sometimes it was okay. And it depended on kind of what the drills were and what we were doing. But sometimes there would be like long swim days, which means you just like swim. And now if you love it, amazing. I just didn't love it. So sometimes my sister and I, we would pretend we were sick or had a stomach ache, or we would even fake leg cramps to get out of the pool. And like, we would really think about all of the ways that we could get out of it, right? And even when you don't have a completely loving relationship with exercise, your mind may not offer up to you, let's fake a leg cramp, but it might give you all of the sneaky little reasons of why you don't want to do it. And there were times that I enjoyed it, but for the most part, I was just like, ugh. I remember being in the car on the way over and working myself up to going. And then on top of it, I mean, I wasn't super big. I wasn't super overweight, but I was a little bigger than the other girls. I'm 5'11" anyways. And then I had a little bit of extra weight on. And it was just like an anxiety-ridden experience. And I just didn't want to do it. So eventually we finished out a season and then we quit. It was glorious. I want you to imagine if you gave yourself permission to stop exercising, to stop moving your body in ways that you don't genuinely enjoy, and if you truly believed it wasn't going to get in your way of your weight loss journey. It's like, blah, like amazing. It was so freeing. And then what happened is I played tennis instead, and I started going to the gym. And I loved playing tennis. I genuinely loved it, and I enjoyed it. And I started loving going to the gym. I actually felt less anxious because I was doing a way of moving my body that felt really good and really right for me. And I had so much anxiety, especially during those years of my life before I developed the skill and the tools for being with my anxiety in a way that's a much calmer, more peaceful way of being. So that was one of the ways that I coped with my anxiety. And now I don't need exercise to cope with my anxiety. I just enjoy exercise for the sake of exercise's sake. And I started going to the gym and I started losing weight, and I started getting some male attention for the first time really in my life. And so I liked it even more. And so I kind of became addicted to going, and not just going for the exercise sake, but it was like an experience of like, if any of you go to the gym a lot, you kind of know what I'm talking about. There's like the people that go at the same time every day and they use the same machines and they start to get to know each other and they talk, and like it becomes this a little bit of like a social outing. And I was getting thin. So I was like, this is perfect. And it wasn't really perfect because I had this kind of still like pressury relationship with it that I would have a lot of anxiety if we couldn't go. And I would drag my younger sister with me, and she would literally be like, after an hour, like, can we go yet? Can we go yet? Because I was driving. And I was like, nope, we're going to be here for like 2 hours. And she was just like, listen, can we get out of here yet? And so I didn't have the healthiest of relationships with going to the gym. And then enter college and drinking and food. And by the time my hungover self got motivated to go to the gym, I could never out-exercise the food and the drinking. I would exercise maybe, let's say, 4 to 5 days a week. I could never out-exercise any of it. And so a few years later then, after I had put on some weight, like I'll say like any quote-unquote normal person, I was like, well, I should learn to run. I should start training for a marathon. I hate running, by the way, but I was like, this is going to be the best way for me to lose weight. Like they all say, swimming and running burn the most calories. I'm like, oh, okay, we've done the swimming thing. Now we're going to try the running thing. And so I trained and I trained and I trained, and I had my little schedule, and I had to like work up to every run. I had to like mentally prepare to like get myself to even like go outside and go for the run. And I would kind of eat and like, right, you had to like quote unquote carb up, especially when you got to the longer runs and you had to like really strategically plan all of your food. Like this did not help with the food obsession. And so I actually ran a half marathon that was in Chicago, and that was one of my kind of quote unquote trainings for that week, was running the half marathon as part of my training schedule. And then I ran my 18-mile run that was part of the schedule a couple weeks later. And I ran and I stopped after 18 miles. And I was like, great, I did that. I flippin' hate running. I like distinctly remember that moment and exactly where I was. And I said, from this moment on, I'm done. I am done exercising in a way that I hate. The only reason I wanted to be a runner was so that I could get to 160 pounds, and I thought it would be magical, right? Once I get there, I'll be able to keep it off. It'll be perfect. But my mind was like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to run forever like this? There has to be another way. And the other crazy thing is I lost 2 pounds while I was training for a marathon. 2 pounds. Because I was so obsessed with the food on the other side of it. I hadn't learned how to have a relationship with food that was separate from exercise. They were so intertwined. And so as I go through all of this, I want you to think about, how can you separate moving your body, your exercise, from how you think about food? Because when you truly listen to what your body is telling you, then yes, if you run 18 miles, your body will probably be telling you that it's hungry, either more intensely or more often, and you can satisfy it. But it's like when you have this obsession with exercise and this obsession with food, exercise allows you to continue to have the obsession with food. And now I look back at myself training for a marathon, and I sort of tilt my head to the side, and with so much love and compassion for that version of me, I think, oh, I'm so grateful that you learned that lesson. And I am so grateful it wasn't fun, and that we decided we are done running. And so then I didn't quite get there after that. It took a softer, more milder version of using a little bit of kind of self-loathing and being hard on myself to use exercise as a way to lose weight. So then I started doing P90X, and I actually really enjoyed it for the most part. But then I did a second round, and then I did a third round, and I started to not like it. And I would get up early, like really early, like sometimes 4 something when I was working to make sure I could work out before I would go into the office. And then there were times too that I was like, well, I have to get up so early so that I can drink coffee and eat breakfast to make sure that I poop before I work out, because like who likes to work out on a really full stomach? And like I need the calories to be able to get me through. It was like quite the little, not so little routine. And just like a restrictive diet, I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. Restrictive diets and exercise you don't like are like very similar. They're really the exact same thing. You use being hard on yourself to motivate yourself, and then you need a lot of willpower to get there. And so if this is you, I want you to recognize it and see the difference between this way of thinking about exercise and then the naturally thin way of exercising. I was talking to a woman recently, and she's like, it's the difference between counting and measuring and restricting and beach bodying when you don't really like it and like tracking everything. The difference between that and avocado toast with yoga. It's just a calmer, more peaceful way of being. Not that you need to eat avocado toast and do yoga, but when you just imagine those two ways of thinking about food and exercise, one is just so much calmer. And when I discovered how naturally thin women exercise, guys, it's so much more enjoyable. And I've shared this before, but I'll share this story again of how I really uncovered this. And here is something too. When I'm done with this story, I'll give you something to think about trying to kind of see if you can get your mind there really quickly. So I was working at a public accounting firm, and I knew busy season was coming up, and we were going to be working 80 plus hours a week at different times throughout that busy season. I knew that was a possibility. And this, by the way, is client chargeable time. So that doesn't mean lunch or dinner or driving or anything like that. So to prepare for this busy season, which is like January through March, I told myself, okay, I am going to be super intentional with my eating. I am going to allow myself to not exercise and just release that pressure from myself. And my goal was not to lose weight. My goal was just not to gain any weight. And during this time, there was a week that I charged 100 client hours. And there were several weeks of 80 and 1 week of 90. And I drove almost an hour each way, assuming it hadn't snowed. And then sometimes it was longer, but like 100 client hours, that's a lot of time. There's not much time for anything else other than sleeping. And during this 12 to 13 week period, I didn't exercise a single day. Even when I had time to rest and relax, I told myself I'm not going to use any form of exercise as a way to kind of punish myself unless I genuinely want to exercise. And I was so flippin' tired, I never wanted to move that body. I lost 20 pounds. I lost 2 pounds training for a marathon. I lost more weight not exercising than training for a marathon, doing P90X, or any other form of movement. I was like, what is happening? It was incredible. It just taught me how unimportant exercise is when it comes to losing weight. It taught me how to separate exercise from food and how we don't need to use exercise as a way to justify what we eat, and we don't eat as a result of justifying the exercise. That they are completely separate, and we can enjoy food for food's sake, and we get to enjoy exercise and moving our body just for the sake of that. And now again, I love to exercise. I love to move my body, but just because I genuinely enjoy it. And when you truly, truly know how to allow your hunger and satisfy your hunger, and it isn't this intellectual exercise to feed your body, but you have this deep sense of knowing of what feels good in your body, and you have no desire to overeat, then of course maybe your food intake does change based on how you're moving your body, but not as a way of restricting food. It's not, you don't use exercise as a way to create this really big deficit so you can lose weight and keep it off and do it really quick. because all it ever does is it ends up working against you. It creates more pressure, more panic, more anxiety, more overwhelm, all of the things which all lead to overeating. So what I see happen is when you remove the pressure of losing weight off of exercise, it feels so liberating, and your brain will stop factoring in how much you did or didn't exercise into your food choices. It literally creates less and less and less of a food obsession. When I took out exercise for those 12 or 13 weeks, for those 3 months, the way that I thought about food, like the time I actually thought about food and the ways I thought about what I should eat and shouldn't eat and good and bad, it reduced significantly. So if this is you, I want you to try stopping any form of exercise you're doing right now that you don't genuinely love. Now listen, your brain should never need to talk you into or out of food based on how much you exercise. If exercise factors into your food choices, you're doing it wrong. It should really be your body sending you those hunger signals. Naturally thin women know exactly how to allow hunger and satisfy hunger because they've calmed down that desire to distract yourself with food. When your brain and your body are in sync, you don't need to intellectualize your food choices. You just listen to your body. And now, here is how I exercise now. And here's how I want you to think about exercising. What feels good? What do you enjoy? What do you imagine that you would, you would need to exert a little bit of effort to do, like to put your shoes on and maybe put your workout clothes on, but you don't dread it. For the past few years, I have been super into barre classes. I did them throughout both of my pregnancies. And then this little thing called COVID hit. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to go as often. They didn't have as many classes. I didn't want to leave the house as much. And so I started walking every day and doing core power yoga on demand. And sometimes they have some weights that you use. And I just love it. I loved doing barre classes. I now love walking and I love doing core power yoga. And I love every form of exercise that I choose. So different exercise, barre versus walking versus core power yoga. There was a time in my life that I loved Jillian Michaels DVDs, genuinely loved them. Different exercises, same exact weight. It is not about the form of exercise, just like it is not about the diet. It is so much more about retraining your brain and your body to work together. Which means if you want a brain and a body to work together when they think about food, they have to work together in how they think about moving your body. If your brain is telling your body we need to go for a run and your body's like, I hate running, all you're doing is creating more disconnect between the two. They have to work together, not just with food, but also how you move your body. Now, it isn't for you to copy the exact way that I exercise or the exact way that I eat, right? Because friends, there are many people at those barre classes and doing yoga or walking that I hear after class when I go to the barre classes talking about this food and this diet and that diet and how they're trying to lose weight and how they ate too much Halloween candy and all the things, right? It is not about the type of exercise. Have I said that yet? It is about how the exercise feels in your body when you're doing it. And do you feel drained or do you feel energized? And not in the way that I feel energized because I feel like I just punished myself, but I genuinely love it and it feels good and I'm listening to my body. Now, for those of us that are a little more anxious and a little more type A than others, this pressure that we put on ourselves around exercise isn't beneficial for anyone, but it especially is not beneficial for us type A, a little bit anxious type of women. It starts to drive us crazy. And all it does is fuel more and more anxiety and more of the obsession. I'm going to give you another example of the holidays. Since it is the holiday season, when you're listening to this, we will have just gone through our American Thanksgiving. And here's how it used to go for me throughout the holidays. And here's how I know when you have this over-attachment to exercise that isn't a calm, peaceful relationship with it, how it works against you. So here's how I would typically start the holiday season, thinking about Thanksgiving time-ish. I would be able to kind of work off Halloween, but then Thanksgiving would come around and I would be like, okay, I'm going to be really quote unquote good. I would exercise intensely in preparation of stuffing myself on Thanksgiving. I remember going to Thanksgiving and talking to other people about how we worked out that morning and how we worked out extra and maybe did another round of working out so that we could eat all of the food. And then I would tell myself, okay, I'm not going to overeat this time. And I'd be like, I'm not doing that this year. My sister and I would say to each other, do not let me have that third round of food or that second round of food, or don't let me have that fourth drink, because once I have that fourth drink, like, I'm done. And so I would exercise a ton in the morning, and then I would get to Thanksgiving, have a couple of drinks, and that second, third, or fourth round of Thanksgiving dinner entered into my mind, and I would say, well, I worked out this morning. And so that starts at Thanksgiving. And then enter a few holiday work parties, and I almost always had at least 5 pounds on by Christmas. And so then Christmas rolls around. I would exercise the whole time during the holiday season, but I would keep gaining weight because it is impossible to out-exercise a lot of food. And so now I would be exercising this whole time, and then Christmas Eve would roll around, and I'd be like, okay, it's kind of same thing as Thanksgiving. I'm going to intensely exercise to pre-work off what I'm going to eat. And Christmas Eve was always our big celebration when we would go to church and then come home and celebrate with family and have drinks and food and open gifts and all the things. And then maybe like Christmas Day would roll around and I'd be a little lethargic. We would have had drinks the night before. And literally between Christmas Day and New Year's Day, I would say, forget it and just be done. I would be all into the food, no exercising, and I would just be like, I don't care, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then I would get on the scale on January 7th, right? I mean, you can't get on the scale on the 1st. Like, that was always just a no. I was like, I need a week to restrict and punish myself with working out so I don't see how bad it, quote unquote, really was. And then I would tell myself, when I got on the scale on January 7th and had put on like 10 to 15 pounds, usually followed by crying, I would be so devastated and tell myself, if I only worked out more. Face, flippin', palm. No, this is the insanity. It literally is insanity, and it feels that way. And then we create so much anxiety and so much pressure, and all we want to do is eat. It's this vicious cycle. Also, side note, speaking of insanity, I used to do the Beachbody workout called Insanity. Terrible. I hated it. It was actually one of my punishment exercises that I would do during the holiday season. And so we create this cycle with this relationship with exercise that's just another way of creating a disconnect between our brain and our body. And truly being naturally thin means your brain and your body work together, and you don't have that desire to distract yourself with food, and exercise isn't a crutch that allows you to do that. Because if this is something you struggle with, I want you to imagine not allowing yourself to exercise. What would need to change for you? If you take exercise off the table as something you allow yourself to do as part of your weight loss journey, it will direct you really quickly to where the work is and for what you need to focus on to change in your relationship with food. Here's the other thing that happens. If you don't work on this now and you use exercise as the way to lose weight and you rely on it, you develop this tighter and tighter grip with it. You develop more and more anxiety the closer you are to your goal weight if you can't exercise, because you make it mean that if you can't exercise, you're going to gain weight if you don't get a workout in. And you develop this really, like, I imagine if exercise is in the palm of your hand, you're like squeezing it so tightly that all that does is not just create even more of an obsession with exercise, but even more of an obsession with food. Because then you're worried about what you should eat and what you can't eat, and you're worried about restricting because you couldn't exercise and all of the things. All it does is put fuel on the fire. And now I'm going to give you the last example of how this showed up for me. We took a trip and we were on a houseboat, and it was amazing and it was beautiful. And this was in my P90X, sort of that phase of my life. And I had already done one round, but I attributed my weight loss to the P90X. Not to how I changed my relationship with food, which I was actually doing a little bit while I was doing the P90X, but I attribute it to the working out. So then on the vacation, I was obsessed. I mean, I had to get a workout in every single day. I brought my DVDs with me. I had to do the DVDs always, and I had so much anxiety if I couldn't wake up and do them. So if people wanted to go out, get off of the houseboat, and you had a little speedboat that was with you that you would take and go out and do excursions and do other things or go for a walk and like move the houseboat, it was not super easy to work out while the houseboat was moving. Any of those things, if I couldn't work out first thing in the morning because people wanted to do things and like go do a little trip and like, I don't know, actually enjoy the vacation, I was so anxious about not being able to exercise. It literally eroded my experience of the vacation. Now, it was still amazing, and yes, I enjoyed it, but I had so much unnecessary anxiety because of my relationship with exercise. Friends, life is too precious to be obsessed with food and to be obsessed with exercise. Let it be fun. Find a way of moving your body that you enjoy. Maybe you genuinely love CrossFit. Maybe you love running. But if you're like those 3 little girls whose dad is yelling at them to pump those arms and grind it out and their face is just like, can I get home yet and play? Then stop the insanity. Find something you enjoy doing. I have clients that love riding bikes. I have clients that love rowing machines in their houses. I have clients that love a treadmill because then they watch their favorite TV show and they just enjoy moving their body in that way, that they don't have to leave their house. That was actually a way that I used to move my body for a little bit of time. A lot of us just love walking, getting outside, listening to a podcast. And here's the other amazing thing. When you genuinely love exercise, then when it rains and you love going for a walk outside, your mind isn't like, well, it's raining, we can't go, right? That's a cue that your mind is like, well, we don't really love it, right? We're kind of doing it as this thing, but now we have this excuse that we don't have to do it. When it rains, guess what? I love walking so much, I take an umbrella with me. I live in Wisconsin. When it snows, I put on a really long big coat and a hat and mittens, and I still go for a walk because I love walking. It doesn't matter what's happening outside because I love to walk. When I genuinely loved bar classes, it didn't matter that my baby was up in the middle of the night. I wanted to go and do that form of exercise because it just felt so good in my body. So much so, I would often get up at 4:45 in the morning and I would pump because I was breastfeeding, pump on my way to go work out, and I would still be in the office by like 7:15. And I just loved it because I loved it for the sake of it, not because it was something I had to do. Because if it was something I had to do and my baby woke up in the middle of the night and I had to pump on the way and I didn't get a quote unquote as much sleep as I wanted, it would be so easy for me to use all of that, which are all valid reasons to not get up early and exercise. But I just loved it for the sake of it, that I wanted to go and do it despite all of those things. I want to go for a walk even when it's raining, even when it's snowing, just because I love it. And that is what I want for all of you. If I can give you all anything, I want to give you the gift of a calm, peaceful relationship with food and with exercise. And that can only ever happen when your brain and your body start working together. And so your brain has to listen to your body when it gives you feedback on movement in your body. And it's the same with food. And the more you do this with exercise and the more you do this with food, it's the same skill set you're developing of letting go of the self-loathing, letting go of punishing yourself and sabotaging yourself with food or exercise, and letting your brain truly listen to what your body is trying to tell you and listening to that because you don't have the desire to distract yourself with food. So friends, find a way of moving your body that you genuinely enjoy. I am giving you permission to stop any form of exercise that you don't love. Now, friends, if you are ready to take this work to the next level and really solidify it in your life, I can help you. I work with you one-on-one and I teach you how to retrain your brain to allow your hunger, satisfy your hunger in a way that feels right for your specific body. You will learn how to ditch that desire to distract yourself with food. And your brain and body start to work in sync so that it stops feeling like your brain is your biggest obstacle and it feels like your brain finally is working for you. You get to actually harness that energy behind the obsession and redirect it to serve you instead of feeling like you are always working against yourself. If you are interested in working with me, go over to lauradixoncoaching.com and click on the Work With Me tab. Friends, I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will talk to you next time.